Dear friends, today marks the 17th day of the Middle East conflict, and the war continues to rage as both sides show no signs of backing down. Iran continues to use the Strait of Hormuz as leverage against the United States, while President Trump is actively trying to rally his allies to join the mission to reopen the vital waterway. However, several key nations are hesitating, fearing the consequences of direct involvement. Meanwhile, Israel has launched a major ground operation in Lebanon, targeting Hezbollah strongholds. To break down today's developments, we turn to our correspondents. On March 16th, President Trump gave an interview to his country's news agency, stating clearly that those who benefit from the Strait's traffic should help secure it. He warned that failure to act could negatively affect the future relationships of those countries. Trump specifically pressured China, noting that 90% of China's oil imports pass through the Strait of Hormuz. He argued that Beijing has an obligation to intervene. He also mentioned that an upcoming summit in Beijing could be delayed if the issue remains unresolved. The president listed several nations the US has contacted for assistance, including Japan, South Korea, Britain, France, China, and others. He argued that if there is a good reason, such as gaining economic benefits, they should participate. So far, reactions have been mixed. Britain. Prime Minister Keir Starmer stated that opening the strait is very important for stabilizing the global market. This was a positive response for Trump. European Union. The EU announced it would hold a meeting to discuss promoting the opening of the strait, though it did not commit to a military mission. This is seen as a positive sign that the bloc is considering the proposal. Japan stated it has no plans to send ships to the strait, having already addressed its energy security by releasing 15 days' worth of oil reserves. Australia said it would not send ships, claiming it had made no contributions and received no formal request. France reaffirmed that its goal is a military operation to resolve the conflict, not escalate it. While France has confirmed it sent 10 ships, including warships and helicopter carriers, to the region, it is unclear if they will enter the strait. South Korea said it is continuing consultations with the United States on the issue. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign minister, in an interview with CBS, stated that Iran does not occupy the strait, but insisted that any country wishing to pass safely must coordinate with Tehran. Reports indicate that China, Pakistan, Turkey, and India have received safe passage guarantees from Iran for oil exports. Sources also confirm that France and Italy have engaged with Iran through major energy companies. Despite the war, Iran claims to have exported 13.7 million barrels of oil, and 55 ships remain in the Gulf of Aden, near an island where the US recently struck military positions without affecting oil facilities. There are reports that the US has already spent more than $12 billion on this war. The $12 billion figure was confirmed by the director of the US National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett, in a recent interview. When asked if the administration would need to request more funding from Congress, he deferred to the Office of Management and Budget. Regarding Trump's motivation, in his Financial Times interview, he revealed that 7 countries are being considered for his military aid specifically to help open the strait. Trump framed this not as a problem, but as a shared interest. He argued that for too long, the United States has borne the burden of protecting global waterways that benefit everyone. Now, he says, it's time for allies to step up and protect their own interests. However, as Secretary of Energy Chris Wright told reporters that he believes his operations could conclude within 2 to 3 weeks, after which oil prices should return to normal. This suggests the administration is planning for an endgame, even as it calls for reinforcements. Why aren't Middle Eastern countries themselves participating in opening the Strait of Hormuz? To understand why Middle Eastern nations are hesitant, we must look at the broader regional situation on March 16th, which remains extremely volatile. Today, Israel launched a major attack, hitting an airport in Tehran. The Israeli Space Agency confirmed the strike, which also targeted fuel storage facilities used for fighter jets. In the Gulf, the US military facilities were targeted, including Abu Dhabi Air Force Base. A Palestinian European resident of the UAE was killed in the attack. The port of Fujairah, the country's largest oil storage facility, was hit by multiple missiles. Emirati officials reported that 21 missiles were launched, with some intercepted. Since the war began, Iran has launched over 1,900 missiles and drones at various targets. In addition to Abu Dhabi, Dubai's international airport was threatened when a fuel depot was struck. Over 60 flights were diverted, 22 flights were cancelled, and the airport temporarily closed, impacting air travel costs and safety. Now, to answer your question about why Middle Eastern countries aren't joining the coalition to open the strait, there are 4 key reasons. Alternative export routes. Saudi Arabia can export oil via pipelines, bypassing the strait. Oman sits at the mouth of the strait and is less affected. The UAE, while adjacent to the Gulf of Oman, can still access international waters. Supply chain vulnerability. These nations are not just responsible for transportation. Their production infrastructure is under direct attack. When factories and facilities are being hit, securing a shipping lane becomes a secondary concern. Geographic limitations. Some Gulf countries are located beyond the strait or have different geographic exposures, making the crisis feel more distant. Fear of retaliation. No nation wants to be seen as openly siding with the US and Israel against Iran for fear of becoming the next target. What is the latest on Israel's attack on Lebanon? On March 16th, the Israel Defense Forces confirmed that 91 troops are now engaged in ground operations in southern Lebanon. The operations are currently limited to targeting Hezbollah strongholds, including the Qaim area and several southern towns and villages. At least 7 people were killed today. According to the Lebanese Ministry of Health, more than 800 people have been killed since the offensive began, and over 800,000 have been displaced. Israel's stated objective is to push Hezbollah back 30 kilometers from its border, with the Litani River as the target line. Residents along the river have been warned that Israel will use force if necessary. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres continues to call on Israel to halt its operations and is urging an immediate ceasefire to end the humanitarian suffering. Last week, French President Macron offered to host peace talks in Paris, but with violence escalating, the prospect of a diplomatic solution appears increasingly distant.